السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم إلى نور الفهم وأكرمنا بمعرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم يا أرحم الراحمين. Allah, we call upon you, pray to you, beseech you, we ask you by names and attributes to guide us, to make us steadfast, to bless us to see truth as truth is, and to make us of those who follow it, and to bless us to see falsehood as falsehood is, and make us of those who avoid it. Ya Allah, we ask you to illuminate our hearts with guidance and make us steadfast on the right path. Guide us and guide others through us, guide us and guide our children, and make this space a space of dhikr, a space of ilm, a space of amal. Guide us to your pleasure and better our affairs and the affairs of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the east and west, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Make the best of our days the last of our days, the best of our actions the last of our actions, the best of all days the day we meet you and you're pleased with us. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Amma ba'd, jazakumullah khair for making it to the masjid in this tough weather. It's a tough day. I think it's the coldest day that I can recall so far, with the feels-like temperature of being 21, I think, when I checked in the morning. So we're getting there. We're getting into winter, or the winter weather. Not yet at winter, but it's getting colder and it's rainy. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to always come to the masjid, and to give us great reward. By the way, there's more reward when you come to the masjid, and it's difficult in doing so. I'm sure it took a lot of jihad nafs to convince yourselves to leave the comfort and warmth of the home. But alhamdulillah, you come to the comfort and warmth of the masjid. So, we're in a big ni'mah when you compare it to many of our brothers and sisters across the world who don't have these luxuries and these forms of ease that we enjoy. Comfortable space, I don't know if it's tea as well, but there's coffee and there's snacks and food and a community environment. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to keep this for us and to allow us to stay around the masjid and around the people who remind us of Allah. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullah khair. And before we go any further into the discussion, I'm going to pass it over to Akhi Ibrahim to share a few announcements. Barakallah feekum.
Barakallah feek, Shaykhna. Barakallah feekum for coming. Before I get into announcements of the programming, there's a few things about Salah and Salah times. Inshallah, this Thursday, Isha will be at 7:30. The Dhikr and Fikr program will not be on because of Thanksgiving weekend. And then also on the weekends, if you do come or happen to come for Dhuhr will be pulled back to 12:30, inshallah, because of the Quran program that we have. Onto what programs we have that are new. We have a Faith Foundations program that starts this Saturday. It'll be every Saturday. For anyone new to Islam or anyone interested in Islam, this is kind of building off of the older course that we had. This is going to be assessing the Prophet's teachings. It'll be a series that'll focus accessing the Prophet's teachings, and it'll be a series where every week they'll jump into a different topic, and that'll be at 6 p.m. On Saturdays, inshallah. So if you or anyone you know is interested in learning more from an introductionary level, or whether it's a new Muslim or newly practicing or someone just interested, please bring them in. And also if there's any reverts that we have a big revert community here, and it's very active. They constantly have programming. So if you know any reverts that may feel like they don't know what's really going on in the community, bring them in on Saturday, and I'm sure we can loop them in with some of the reverts and converts, and they can feel more a part of this community. Also,
just to clarify, sorry, it's not every Saturday.
Okay.
It's individual sessions. This is the second session. The first one, we went over accessing the Quran. The second one, we're going over accessing the Prophet's teachings. Very basic level explanation for anyone who's new to Islam or considering it. Sorry to cut you off.
No, absolutely. Sidi. And then also every Sunday we've been having our thematic Quranic analysis every Sunday. We started with Surah Al-Baqarah, every week going through a different surah and understanding its theme, and now we're at Surah Al-Tawbah. So 6 p.m. on Sunday, we'll be decoding the revelation and understanding themes in the Quran. And then we have the Gardens of the Righteous class that is on every Tuesday after Isha. So alhamdulillah, Sundays we have after 6 a program revolving around Quran, Gardens of the Righteous Tuesday after Isha, so around 7:30. And then Fridays we have Friday Forum, and then also Dhikr and Fikr on Thursdays. So almost every day you'll find something here at ICPC Clifton. And with that, do we have any other announcements, Sidi? Or we're good to start? Okay. So before we get into the topic, first we have the Slido as always. You can access that. If you have any relevant questions, you can put them on the Slido. And if you see a question you like, you can thumbs up. If it gets to the top or the most relevant questions, we'll get through them first. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So that's the code and the QR code. And if you have any questions at all, just put them there. Sidi, is there anything that caught your attention specifically this week before we get into it? Anything in the news?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, Akhi Ibrahim. I think that probably everyone's heard the two most critical pieces of news in the past week that's relating to what's happening around the world, right? First one is the hand that was raised to veto the ceasefire. And I think I saw a nice picture. Can someone please close that door over there? Seems like a war is happening downstairs. I saw Shaykh Umar Suleiman, he posted a picture of the hand that was raised to declare the veto against the ceasefire. And he had a very beautiful reflection. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless him. And that was, this hand is going to witness on the Day of Judgment for what the superpowers or some of the superpowers of today chose to do against our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine. It's a very tragic thing to continue to see. And we're not asking for more than just stopping the bombs, stopping the fighting, stopping the killing. They've decimated Gaza many times over. Enough is enough. And any person with any sensibility could realize that what's happening is going to be spoken about at a certain point in history. Not now, maybe a few years from now, maybe a decade or two, but the people of the future are going to reflect back on this time, and it's going to be characterized by how abuse of power was on overdrive. A'udhu billah, how superpowers allowed themselves to kill so many people in such a brazen and disgusting way. And we pray that Allah Azza wa Jal ultimately holds those who did this accountable in this dunya before the akhirah. We pray that they experience demise and ruin and punishment in this dunya before they're held accountable before Allah Azza wa Jal on the Day of Judgment. So that's the first piece of news. The second piece of news is about the arrest warrants that were issued by the ICC. And of course, we're not waiting for the ICC to tell us who Netanyahu and Gallant and the rest of the Zionist infrastructure are. We're not waiting for that. We know who they are. We know the war criminals that they are. We know the genocidal maniacs that they are. But for it to be announced this way just makes our stance on Palestine so much more mainstream. Now it's not just Muslims, now it's not just people who have certain leanings who are embracing this idea that Israel has gone too far, right? It's something that's become accepted by the majority of the world, and the only ones who are too set in their ways to accept that are pretty much America and Israel. All right? So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to better the situation. And I had the title of my khutbah today as the first cracks, because I think that if you've been following the news for the past few weeks, you'll realize that Allah is showing us His signs, that Allah is making infighting and conflict and disagreement between the Zionist infrastructure apparent. And this is from Allah's doing. And we pray for this. Allahumma ja'al ba'sahum baynahum shadida. Oh Allah, make their opinion not in their favor, and make the conflicts between them so well known and widespread that it ends up leading to their demise because of it. That's our prayer to Allah Azza wa Jal. So these are the first cracks. And I wholeheartedly believe that there's going to be a point very soon where the likes of Netanyahu and Gallant are thrown in the trash bins of history. They're nobodies. If it happened to Fir'aun, it's not going to happen to Netanyahu. If it happened to the kings of the past, it's not going to happen to Netanyahu. If it happened to the colonial powers, now there are countries, and this is one of the things I said, the colonial powers, who are they today? Right? Does anyone care about the colonial powers, whether you're talking about the Dutch or the Spaniards or whoever else? They mean nothing. Their countries also mean nothing. Right? Those powers that spread far and wide, colonizing different areas and location, now are weightless, right? All that is gone. That power is relinquished, right? The British Empire that spread its wings far and wide, the Italian colonizers, the French colonizers that have affected the lives of so many in the Muslim world for many years, all of that's gone. Wasted history. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to show us His signs in that. That's my reflection from the week. Wallahu musta'an.
Ameen. Barakallah feek. Now, getting into our topic of how we choose our scholars, who we choose to learn from, how we develop that framework. Why is that important now? Why did you choose this topic specifically to discuss?
Bismillah. So, in our times, we live in an age of mass information. There's just so much access. Online, social media, everything is out there for anyone to digest, and very often it's digested in all the wrong ways. Who should I be learning from? Who can grab a mic and talk? In this day and age, there is no censorship of what people could say and what people could do, right? And sometimes you might find someone who literally has no training, no background, no understanding, grab the attention of millions of people. And this is actually one of the features of the end of time that the Prophet ﷺ told us. Prophet ﷺ, when he describes how in the end of times things will become so confusing that the truthful will be seen as a liar and the liar will be seen as a truthful person, and the treacherous one will be seen as trustworthy and the trustworthy will be seen as treacherous. In the end of that, the Prophet ﷺ says, وَتَنْطِقُ فِيهَا الرُّوَيْبِضَةِ or وَيَنْطِقُ فِيهَا الرُّوَيْبِضَةِ. In those times, what the Prophet ﷺ refers to as ruwaybidah will speak out. So they asked the Prophet, what is a ruwaybidah? What does that mean? So he said, الرَّجُلُ التَّافِهِ يَتَكَلَّمُ فِي أَمْرِ الْعَامَّةِ. It is someone of little significance speaking about matters of public discourse, things that affect large swaths of people, right? So in our day and age, it could become easily, especially considering that the human link is lost between people, right? There's not, much human interaction very often because of the different devices that we have to interact, whether you're talking about social media or online world or our phones or gadgets, whatever else it is. And that human interaction and that connection was a critical part of scholarship in the past. What do you get from that? Why is the human connection so important? Because our tradition, from the Prophet ﷺ's time until today, was one that was largely communicated generationally through those dealings and those relationships. Says Udwan, if you could please just keep that door closed. Allah barik feek. The other door. So it was communicated generationally, and you would find the student, the aspiring person of knowledge, would not only learn the information needed to teach others, but also the character along with it. And that was a critical part of the process. It was a critical part of the process. So why is this important? I really brought the subject to self-reflect, because sometimes things happen in our day and age that cause people to doubt their faith, whether it's some scandal that comes out about someone who people held in high regard did something very unbecoming. That's something that affects people's iman a lot because of the nature of our religious, spiritual consumption today. How do we engage with knowledge and with individuals who teach us how does that end up affecting us spiritually? The scandals that come out, or the misinformation that's there, and the great deal of confusion that ends up happening, and the controversy that happens because of how things are processed in our world. So there's like a few points of reflection, and I really hope that you guys would join me. Share your comments, questions in the Slido, and we'll try to include it in the discussion. But I'm really just sharing this to self-reflect. Because we're all vulnerable. We're all weak unless Allah gives us strength. We all are misguided unless Allah guides us. We're all trying to become better people. And we all should have that mindset of, with every single day, I'm seeking to become a better person from cradle to grave. My growth never stops. There's no such thing as a person being invincible, beyond reproach, infallible. That's just not a thing unless the person is ma'soom. And the only ones who we know have isma and divine protection are the prophets. Otherwise, we can all make mistakes. We're all vulnerable. I could fall prey to the whispers of the shaitan. My nafs could easily get the better of me, whether I'm someone who has no knowledge or I'm someone who is among the most knowledgeable people of my times. We're all vulnerable to that, regardless of who we're talking about. So the questions I want to address are, what should I look for in a teacher? Can I assess academic credibility if I don't have knowledge myself? That's one of the challenges. What are the spiritual indicators? What should I be looking for spiritually in someone who teaches me about Islam? What are the things relating to personal practice that I should be looking for to identify whether I should take this from this person or not? In their personal practice, what should I be looking for? Right? These are things that we can assess. It's very difficult as someone who doesn't have any background and knowledge to say, oh, this person is knowledgeable and that person's not knowledgeable. It's hard to do that. How am I going to do that if I don't have any background? I can't. But these are other things that I can do. What are the signs? Does this person accept advice? Does this person correct himself when mistaken? All right, we're going to talk about all these things. What are some red flags? Are scholars perfect? We just already mentioned that. What happens when we take an approach to religion that's all about celebrity fanfare? And how does that cause people to doubt their Islam? A lot of what we find in our religious circles is influenced by the challenges that greater society face. We live in the age of appearances. I need to present myself in a certain way. And based on how I present myself, you'll perceive me, right? I need to beef up my resume. I need to market myself and put myself out there. These are notions and ideas that are on people's minds in our society. Because you know what? If I don't put myself out there, if I don't beef up my resume, if I don't make myself look greater than I really am, then I won't get the fanfare that I'm seeking. I won't get the followership that I'm seeking, right? So these are all things that plague our intentions and plague our spiritual well-being. So there's a lot of reasons to reflect on this question. Not to mention there's a lot of confusion on religious issues because people don't know who to ask in certain situations. Now, if someone is a quote-unquote scholar, does that mean that they could address anything and everything? How should I feel about someone who has the audacity and the jur'ah to not know his or her own personal boundaries, right? What are healthy boundaries that should be put in place? What are safeguards that should be put in place to try to make sure that we preserve the integrity of our deen, right? Is it just anyone that could talk about anything? Is there a concept of specialization in Islam? And how should that affect how I try to learn and grow as a Muslim? These are all really big questions. Again, the Friday forum is usually a discussion. So I don't want to, there's no way that we could fully address all of these issues, but I'm going to try to address some of them. And then hopefully you guys will join me with whatever's on your mind. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. So there was a comment here, and I want to build off of it to start a conversation and add some color to this. So someone has a comment. I always disliked how society and culture affects perception of our religion. Arabs, unfortunately, don't always show the best representation of it. And building off of that, we've seen other religions, such as the Catholic Church, lose a lot of credibility because of the people representing their church, or priests acting in unholy ways. And we have, no religion has been has not had that. Unfortunately, we have people who have not been, the best representation of the deen. So how do we work through that? How do we deal with that when we have, let's say, a lot of Muslims who maybe were, isolated the masajid because of bad experiences, or have heard of certain imams or certain people who may have let them down, and because of that, I said, I can't listen to this person, or I can never come back to this masjid, or how do we keep that, I guess, faith within?
Jazakallah khair for the question. Look, I really think, I'm going to emphasize this point once again, I really think it's critical and important to realize that everyone around me, whether they're an imam, da'i, scholar, an aspiring student, everyone around me in the end of the day is a human being. We all have our flaws and our weaknesses. If I expect, this happens, and I'm saying this from this position because I have to, right? But otherwise, I, as an imam, say this. I work in this line, and it happens sometimes where sometimes someone will misunderstand or take offense to a certain characteristic that a person exhibits, and they'll stop going to that masjid, like you said, or they'll stop going to the masjid. And it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. Sometimes there's a lot of element of misunderstanding, but again, if my attachment to the masjid is because of an individual, then my attachment to the masjid will be short-lived, because human beings will always falter. They'll always make mistakes, right? Again, even when it came to the Prophet ﷺ, when the companions thought the Prophet ﷺ died in Uhud, and it made them have doubts and lose their footing, the Quran addressed this. The Quran said, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. Even though Muhammad ﷺ is خَيْرُ الْخَلْقِ أَجْمَعٍ, he's al-Habib al-Ma'soom, he's the protected one by Allah. The Quran addressed the companions, telling them, hey, what are you doing? Muhammad, before him, messengers came. أَفَإِن مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقلبتم عَلَىٰ عَقَابِكُمْ. If he was to die or be killed, will you turn on your heels? So it's very, very important. And this is what I mean when I say celebrity culture. Celebrity culture, it's all about the individual. But if anyone's connected to the Quran, they will know not to do shakhsana, right? It's not about the shakhs. The Quran teaches us this practically, to look at the principles beyond the individuals. The Quran magnifies principles, and it mentions individuals on a secondary level, right? If it was all about the names and the individuals, the Prophet ﷺ would be the most mentioned prophet in the entire Quran. But the Prophet ﷺ was mentioned as Muhammad 4 times and Ahmad as once. He's not the most mentioned prophet in the Quran. If it was all about individuals, and Islam teaches me to slave over individuals, then the Prophet ﷺ is the most beloved of individuals. He'd be mentioned most. And especially my love for the Prophet ﷺ is stemming from my love for revelation and my love for the beauty of his soul, right? Because of his amal, because of how great a person he was, right? So this individualistic approach to deen is exactly what causes people to fall into doubts. It's not about celebrity fanfare. Social media, again, just like it is the literal reality of balloon manfukh, right? I'm gonna have like 100,000 followers, and my videos are gonna be everywhere, and I'm gonna have like these reels and these clips and مش عارف إيه, and you're gonna think that I am Shaykh Islam himself, and it turns out that I don't even have a degree. I'm just a charismatic speaker. That's a scary thing. That is symptomatic of fanfare. And that's exactly what causes people to doubt their deen when one of these scandals happens. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us. But again, realizing, look, the shaykh in front of you or the learned person in front of you is a human being. You know, he may not realize, she may not realize what their or how their character is affecting you. They might not realize that they've offended you. They may not realize that there was certain shortcomings from them. Realize that that person's on their own journey of growth, just like on your own journey of growth. It's possible. It happens. So that's what I would say to that question.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. So I think one of the most primary questions here is, where do we start? You know, what order do we go in? How do we learn what we trust, what we avoid? Oftentimes we find that as students in college and schools, we're going to listen to an elder, we're going to listen to a teacher or a mentor. And I found that a lot of students at times, they may be in even an Islamic studies class with someone who is not qualified to teach Islamic studies at a, let's say, more liberal arts school or something of that nature. And that may take them for a spin. How do we know, like, how do we assess that? How do I know who should I be taking my deen from?
Look, there are 3 points of focus that I had in mind to answer this type of question. What are the 3 points of focus? First off, a person's credibility in terms of their knowledge. That's one point of focus. The second one is, how is this person spiritually? Now, of course, that's in the heart. How can you see that? Well, sometimes you can see it behaviorally. Like, and this is a really, really important part. And what's the litmus test? What's the scale? What's the bar that I follow to address, someone that I could grow from spiritually, right? So that's number 2. And then the third thing is the personal practice. Now, I think all in all, weighing every example that comes your way to the Prophet ﷺ is a critical piece to this puzzle. What does that mean? If I'm listening to somebody, I need to be aware of, what was the Prophet's character like? Was the Prophet ﷺ divisive? Was the Prophet ﷺ emotionally unstable? Was the Prophet ﷺ one to put people on blast? Was the Prophet ﷺ one to defame others? Was the Prophet ﷺ arrogant or injurious? Right? The answer to all of these is, of course, not. So if I find an approach to knowledge that is very dismissive, very injurious, very hurtful, very aggressive, I can automatically discard that as something that I should not listen to. But if I'm someone who doesn't know how Habib Muhammad ﷺ was, then I will not be able to, compare. What's the basis that I compare to, right? These are behavioral things that serve as red flags. They're behavioral things that serve as red flags. So the more I become acquainted with the example of the Prophet ﷺ and the example of scholarship from our past, the more I will be able to make proper judgment about what I should listen to. That's one thing. The other thing is, and I think that this is something I learned from my journey with learning from my various teachers that come from all different sides of the spectrum. It's really, really important to not be a person who blindly follows, right? Listen, take it in, hear from others as well, and allow yourself to weigh what you're hearing from one individual against what you're hearing from others who are also linked with scholarship. If you find someone, as the scholars actually define this for us, يَأْتِي بِالْغَرَائِبِ, always bringing the strange and unique things, always pursuing the controversial, that is a hallmark of someone that you should be very careful to learn your deen from. Someone who's always pursuing the controversial and actually their bread and butter is by creating hype and controversy, that is a really bad sign. That's someone that you should be very careful from investing too much of your mind and your heart in. Because by the way, we learn from our scholars. Like Imam Malik, his mother gave him golden advice. And this is how they lived their lives. اذهب إلى ربيعة فتعلم من أدبه قبل علمه. Go to your teacher Rabi'ah, learn from his etiquette before you learn from his knowledge, right? So when you sit down and listen to somebody, realize that their character will impact you as a person. Before the information that they give you will impact you. So that's why it's very critical to be mindful of who you allow yourself to listen to, right? So this is another thing to consider. I mentioned some other things, and I'll give you the answers. Like one of the telltale things for our scholars from the past is whether the person corrects himself when mistaken. That's a sign that everyone can identify. Look what Imam Shafi'i says. Imam Shafi'i says golden words. He says, ما أردت الحق على أحد فقبله إلا هبته واعتقدت مودته ولا كابرني على الحق أحد إلا سقط من عيني. This is a sign. Imam Shafi'i gives us a sign. You want to know a sign? When truth is presented to somebody, very clearly, when the person realizes that they were wrong, how do they react? Do they retrace their steps and correct themselves? Or do they double down and insist in falsehood? Right? If the person doubles down and insists, that's a sign that the person's heart is not in a good place. Right? How does the person accept advice? That's a critical thing for every Muslim, whether you have knowledge or not. How do you accept advice? If it's arrogantly received, that's a sign that there's a lot of work that needs to be done inside. If it's received very humbly, then that's a very good sign. So these are telltale things to look for. And you know what? Why does this matter? Our scholars, they stated from long ago, إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ فَانْظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. This knowledge, this Islam that we practice, that we live, it is our faith. So be very mindful of who you take your faith from. So caution is really, really critical in this regard. Allahu A'lam.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. There's a lot of good questions coming in. One of them is, how do we avoid the celebrity imam culture? Falling into this idea that these imams, these celebrities are more than human, or idealizing them and seeing them as flawless. How do we keep ourselves centered?
All right, how do we avoid celebrity imam culture? The way I would address this is, look, I need to have the capacity to have a more meaningful purpose in my connection with my deen. What do I mean to say? When people have a feel-good approach to Islam, what will affect them the most? A 1-minute, 60-second motivational talk. And for them, that might mean a whole lot more than something that will actually teach them their obligations before Allah. The path to knowledge, and you learn this when you sit with scholars from back home, from our Muslim country, from many different parts. When you sit with them, you realize it's not a glamorous path. What makes the glamour surrounding these things? Our society, with the age of appearances again, right? So what is my approach to Islam? Is it a feel-good approach? Then that's exactly what contributes to celebrity imam culture. What do people value? What are they looking for? Right? Even like, say, for example, if you were to take the subject of Quran, people who do not have standards or don't have background, the highest value that they would ascribe would be to the most melodious and sweetest voice. But someone who realizes the value of the Quran and has a more meaningful approach will realize that, in fact, the melodious voice is the least considered when you're talking about the power of the Book of Allah. Look at the meaning. Look at the perfection of its recitation. Look at the depth that's there, right? So, and that would be with everything. It would be with everything. What are you looking for? If you're looking for understanding, if you're looking for growth, then realize that's not going to be a glamorous path. Not many people are going to want that. People want to just take something quick and go, because that's what social media has created. Social media has created an attention span of 10 to 15 seconds. And if you can't grab my attention in the first 10 to 15 seconds, I will not listen to the remaining 45 seconds. Right? I'm not going to do it. 10, 15 seconds, you don't catch me, khalas, next video, next video, next video. and next video after that, right? Again, it's not good, right? So that reality is part of the culture that we already have to deal with as people who live in this day and age. Wallahu alam, yani.
Barakallahu feek. Building off of that,
So there is just one thing. Like if I was to say one thing, Hanji lak Hajj, if there is one thing, yani one of the scariest things that I perceive when it comes to teaching the deen, something, I try to remind myself a lot, is the concept of jur'ah. When you, look, people, this is how people look at it very often. When people see a person of knowledge, this person should be able to address anything and everything. If the person hesitates and can't answer something, maybe this person doesn't really have knowledge. But in fact, historically speaking, you'll find that those who had the most knowledge had the most hesitation. And that's why our scholars, they teach us these golden words. Whoever does not learn la adri, does not learn their own boundaries and their limitations, I don't know, that's what la adri means, then this person will suffer fatal blows to their hearts. You need to know la adri. I don't know. If I have the jur'ah and the audacity to address the most controversial and difficult topics that the biggest scholars of our time have hesitated with, then that's a very, very bad sign. Jur'ah and audacity is a sign of ignorance, right? Hesitation, second guessing yourself, and wanting to look something up, not being able to answer. Those are signs that the person actually cares about the knowledge that he or she is dispensing. So for me, this is the scariest thing. And just to add to that, look, not every person who is a good speaker necessarily is well versed in every facet of Islamic knowledge. Even if the person has knowledge. And that's why the scholars, they talk about this. When someone specializes in an area, وَيَتَكَلَّمُ فِي غَيْرِ فَنِّهِ وَاخْتِصَاصِهِ. When this person starts speaking about another discipline, about something that he's not very well versed in, you will find that person will expose himself to making egregious mistakes, right? Someone who's specialized in tafsir is not someone who could give fatwa, is not someone who could address fiqh issues. And when they do address fiqh issues, they will confuse things and cause misdirection and misinformation all around. That's what happens, right? So I need to know who to ask and what to ask them. Some people have the noble role of motivating others. Motivating others is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. Someone who's able to give motivational talks, but I need to know my limitations. If I'm someone who is in a position where I can say impactful words that penetrate people's hearts, I need to be very careful. All right, what is the extent of my knowledge and where should I stop? Right? And the scary thing is sometimes you might find someone who could just pick up a translation. Well, I'm a smart person, right? I don't know Arabic, but I could read the translation. I'm going to read the translation. I'm going to start explaining away the Quran. And I've seen this happen, by the way, sometimes. Someone doesn't even know the context of Revelation, starts speaking of the Book of Allah, not even from the original Arabic, from the translation, right? And we know the Prophet ﷺ, he says this, whoever speaks of the Quran without clear knowledge, أَخْطَأَ وَإِنْ أَصَابَ. This person's mistaken even if he's right. Right? So that's what I would say is the scariest thing to me. Jur'ah, audacity. Knowledge teaches boundaries. Allahu alam.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna. And building off the previous question with the celebrity culture, the next question is, how do we process these scandals spiritually? When someone teaches Quran or someone teaches any of these things in Islam and scandals come out, how do we process that?
How do you process it spiritually? Look, may Allah Azza wa Jal help us all. Like I said, process it through this lens. If you see someone fall, pray for that person. Feel bad. Feel hurt in your heart. That's in our day and age, whenever we see someone fall or misstep or lose their footing, you find that people come at them like vultures. They want to devour them alive and want to smear their reputation left and right. Be very careful. Even if this person did a major sin, even this person did an egregious thing, be very careful. If Allah Azza wa Jal has saved you from needing to be the person who directly deals with a certain reality, why on earth would you expose yourself to speaking about things without clear knowledge, right? You might not even have ever had a conversation with the person, and all of a sudden you know the ins and outs of why this person did what he did, and why did what's the whole storyline of it because you read a few posts online. Be careful. Be careful. If Allah saved you from speaking about others, don't expose yourself to being the person who breaches those boundaries when you don't need to. Right? So that's my first advice. Whenever you hear of a scandal happening, feel bad, right? Because it's a sign of the shaitan getting the better of another human being, and I could have easily been gotten the better of by the shaitan. Someone fell yesterday, I could fall tomorrow, right? I don't know. May Allah forgive us. May Allah better us. Again, I know when a person, not all sins are the same, right? When a person of knowledge commits a sin or position or public trust, when a person violates the public trust, of course it'll make people feel so much stress and anxiety, especially if this person was their connection to the Quran or to Islam or to the masjid or to whatever else it is. Of course it'll cause that. But again, do not miscontextualize it. My deen's not tied to individuals, right? Individuals come and go. And, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes somebody, because what happens? Look, أَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَفْضَحُ مِنَ الْمَرَّةِ الْأُولَى. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't disgrace someone from the first time. If someone got to the point where they were exposed for something that they've done, pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that He doesn't expose you for the many things that are hidden and concealed from the eyes of others. That's how I should feel. Because you know what? Our scholars, subhanAllah, and that's why I said one of the critical things that you should search for in anyone that you learn Islam from, the spiritual state. Look at the spiritual state. Look at what our scholars teach us. Their mindset and their attitude. If my sins had a scent, no one would accept to sit in my vicinity. That's how they viewed themselves, right? The companions themselves, way past any scholar or any person, the companions themselves. We learn about them that, as the next generation, the tabi'in described, one of them said, I met scores of companions, all of them, worrying about themselves that they were hypocrites, that they were munafiqeen. That level of introspection is exactly what you should be looking for in a person's personal practice, right? The person who's quick to put others on blast and humiliate people when they make mistakes, that person's not prophetic in any way. No, but how do I manage this? Again, whenever your deen is tied to individuals, guess what? You're going to fall into doubts, right? So we learned this. I'm attached to principles. How do I overcome this trauma or these difficulties? Well, look, there needs to be healthy boundaries in place. Part of these healthy boundaries is, again, our community needs to rise above giving fanfare to hype, noise, again, all the theatrics and the noise and the marketing and the presentation of things and individuals. Our community needs to get past that if we want to get past this type of reality. It should not be, and this is we have a reversed reality now. Like I met someone who is of a very high level of scholarship. One of my teachers, and I think I spoke about him here before. One of my teachers from Egypt, if you saw the way he lived, it would be difficult for you to wrap your head around it, right? His living room is literally the size of like a 5x8, and I'm not even exaggerating. That's the welcome space. There's a couch on one side, and then a couch right across from it, and a very narrow, half foot between them that you could put your feet between. It's like a prison cell. But that, his level of scholarship didn't give him all the limelight and the views and the followership. People don't give value to that. People are not necessarily looking for that. People are looking for something else, right? So what are you looking for? You'll get what you look for. Wallahu alam. So how do you overcome some of these things? Realize what you're banking on in terms of your own spiritual growth. If you're looking for substance, you'll find it. If you're looking for something else, you'll find that. Wallahu alam.
Barakallahu feek. And when someone does make a mistake like that, so there's some conversation in the questions about, so one person's opinion is, if someone says one mistake or makes one mistake or has one controversy, it's still good to take the knowledge, or they'll still find it beneficial to take some things from that person. When is it too much? Do you agree or disagree?
Look, if I waited to find someone who was perfect to learn from, I would have never learned a single thing. It's not going to happen. Yeah, I've come across a lot of people who have a ton of information, ton of knowledge. Their personal practice is not necessarily something that I can entirely embrace. At least in my short-sightedness or in my realization, and my understanding, there are certain things that I would take from certain individuals, but I wouldn't take everything, right? You don't have to. You don't need to blindly follow like that. I'm going to surrender my mind to person X, Y, or Z. No. I will take the khair wherever it is. If person X, Y, or Z, and that's why I tell you, among those people that I learned from are people from all sides of the spectrum. People who I ideologically disagree with, and other people who I may not necessarily be a fan of their political views, but I need to compartmentalize like that. What should I take and what shouldn't I take? It's a journey, right? Take everything with a grain of salt and just, try to process things. And the more you get exposed to, the more your understandings will be enriched. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah. There was some direct questions that if you want to take them. There was one here and I think one over there. تفضل حج. تفضل.
هل من جهود تبذل أو بالأحرى ألم يأن الأوان لتوحيد علمائية الجهود جبها لردة قواد الأعاريب مسيلمة العصر ابن سلمان الذي اقترف من الفساد والإفساد في الأرض ما يستحق العقاب فضلا عن وجهة.
Jazakallah khair. So just to summarize his question, Jazakallah khair على السؤال اللي هو أكبر مني يعني. أنا رجل صغير كده, ده سؤال كبير يعني. So the question that he says is, isn't it time to unite all the efforts of the scholars to speak out against bin Salman, who's done so much egregious things? Look, we live in very tough times. We live in extremely tough times. Tawheed al-ulama, or unifying the scholars, is not something that, look, Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ, right? One of the features of the end of time is that people of understanding and sensibility will also feel confusion and a sense of hira. We find the Prophet ﷺ telling us that in the end of times, the person will pass by a grave, and because of the fitna and the fasad and the corruption, the person will say, if only I was in the place of the person in this grave. So we are in a time where things are not clear. And the direction, okay, so if I was going to go against someone or something, well then what? What's going to happen then? Am I going to طلع bayan, or what am I going to do? Do I have the capacity to have a scholarly body, or, where can I gain strength as an individual? This is a very, very tough, we live in a very tough time. That's why I say, right now, you talk about atheism in America. I'll tell you about atheism in Egypt. Egypt is a place that I know more than my original country, Palestine. I lived in Egypt for 8 years, right? In the 8 years that I lived in Egypt, I got exposed through the media to all kinds of afkar, haddama, and destructive ideologies and thoughts that are coming from the tongues of people who are supposed to be people of knowledge, right? There's a lot of that. The atheistic wave that's in Egypt or in other Muslim countries is symptomatic of the confusion of our time. So I wish that we could unify the ummah on any given one of these causes, not whether it's bin Salman or Sisi or the king of Urdun or anything else in between. We live in where there's so much difficulty on every layer of living. If I'm going to address one problem, I'm going to find 100 problems in the face of it. And then what's the mechanism? There was a period of time. Look, one of the things that, subhanAllah, there's so much khair in the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is so much khair. And when the shackles are removed and the ummah is freed of its subjugation, we're going to see something rapidly change. I'll tell you, there was like a breath of fresh air, when I was in Egypt. When I was in Egypt, I experienced 4 years of Mubarak, 1 year of the military council, 1 year of Mursi, and a year and a half of Sisi, and then after that I left. Right? After that it was too much. So a big pocket in Egyptian history. And I remember before and after, the first 4 years, you wouldn't go study in someone's house. That's very dangerous, right? You need to do this very discreetly. I remember going to Salat al-Jumu'ah in Al-Azhar. That used to be my local masjid. Masjid Al-Azhar used to be my local masjid. So whenever you go to Salat al-Jumu'ah, you don't talk. You don't look left or right because you don't know who's who. And you find right at the entrance, it's not like ambiguous or hidden or something like that, a line of people from the security forces looking for anyone who looks out of place. Too big of a beard, too religious in their look, people talking to each other, then they're going to be followed, right? A lot of persecution. After that, what happened? When there was some freedom, you started seeing during what they call, it wasn't the Arab Spring unfortunately, but what they called the Arab Spring, in that short window of time, you started finding scholarly conferences and Islamic institutions come up here and efforts there. And once the ummah was able to breathe for a second, you saw the massive amount of goodness coming from every direction. Scholars coming from all over meeting, discussing big issues, real issues. And they're actually able to talk about it on the manabir and in their khutab and in their classes, right? So this is the big problem of the ummah today. There is a sense of subjugation and suppression. We will not be able to figure out any of these problems until that subjugation is lifted. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يجعله عاجلا غير آجل. اللهم آمين. Jazakallah khair. So our brother is just pointing out, there are a lot of scholars who are influenced by the political climates of their countries. And when they are so close to the people in positions of power, it ends up influencing their rhetoric and what they say. And I would say yes, you're very right. What you're saying is very true. And again, we are in a situation that, you can't see things black and white. You can't see things black and white. It's so difficult to do taqdeer al-maslaha and to ascertain where is the best interest and where does it lie. The best thing I could possibly do is to try to carve a path for me that's most pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal, and to try to have as generous assumptions wherever, whenever possible. And realize that Allah Azza wa Jal is the ultimate judge of judges. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold everyone accountable, whether they were learned or not, for everything they said and did and why they said and did it. Maybe perhaps someone I thought was not excused will be excused before Allah. Maybe someone I thought was excused will not be excused before Allah Azza wa Jal. La adri. I don't know. Again, that's one of the features of our time. And that's why we need to be very careful. If Allah did not thrust me into a position where I need to pass judgment on certain situations, then why do I need to pass judgment? Just leave it to Allah. Allah will take care of it. Allah will take care of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and ummah al-Habib, and this ummah is ummah marhuma. There is a lot of goodness in the ummah, right? So again, like sometimes people are forced into certain situations, and sometimes people are not excused for their silence. Who knows which of the two situations applies? Like we have the likes of Imam Ahmad from our past, where he had to make immense sacrifices in the face of standing up for what's right, so that the deen is not changed. So that scholarly tradition is set from him and from the likes of Imam Shafi'i and those before and those after, that they had to stand up for what's right with the knowledge and the position that Allah Azza wa Jal gave them. It's a very critical thing. But ultimately, again, when they study about scholars, they also study the social and political realities of their time. Because guess what? That stuff influences people in their opinions. Now, do you not think that the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the Ummah going from a position of strength to a position of weakness has affected the scholarly views that are coming in various arenas and various subjects, all facets of life? I'll tell you from a position of someone who's trying to learn from this beautiful tradition, this beautiful deen, that a lot of what our scholars in the modern era had to do is catch up. The world is changing way too fast and too rapidly, and I can't change the dynamics of it. I need to find a way where I can make Islam fit in and work with the circumstances. And because of that, it ends up changing the rhetoric and the views. Now, I'm not telling you right or wrong. I'm just telling you from a practical standpoint. Now, even like to take, for example, when you're talking about people and their monies, right? People and their jobs. I could tell people, hey, you know what? Any job that you take that has any element of haram, X, haram money, no good. But if I do that, you know what people are going to end up doing? They're going to end up jobless and on unemployment or khalas on the side. Even Imam Ghazali, who lived nearly 1,000 years ago, realized this about his time. Now that فسدت أكثر المعاملات وانتشر المال الحرام. During his time, he's saying this 1,000 years ago. It's become so difficult to find 100% halal, right? So now I, as a Muslim who cannot dictate the parameters and the realities and the dynamics, sometimes I'm forced into certain situations. So I need to be very, very careful. It's very easy to become a what do they call it? What's it called? Armchair critic. It's very easy to be an armchair critic. Sometimes people are put in a situation, hey, you know what? Spend the next 20, 30 years of your life in jail and not get to say any word of goodness, or be quiet on everything political and teach the few people that are in your circles and make yourself a living. It's a very tough, which one's the right way and which one's the wrong way and who should do this and who should do that. Wallahi, these are things that, I'm telling you, that's why I told you, someone who thinks that they could address all the problems of reality is someone who's delusional. Someone who, it doesn't understand what's going on and what's happening in the world. It is such a tough reality. That's why it'll cause all kinds of hesitation. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna.
Is there, but we took a lot of brothers. Is there any sisters who have questions or comments? Anything? No?
Yeah, how many more do you want to take?
Oh, what time is it? 9? Yeah, we can take a few more.
Okay. I'll get you next. Yeah, go ahead, brother. No problem.
Anything we don't agree with, even though it is like something that's in writing or something that's for the greater good. So many times I'm conflicted about how to address it, to the point where I was talking about leaving my position, but I get torn at times. I should stay or should leave, but it's only two of us. And sometimes our voices count, but a lot of times it doesn't.
So general feedback is it seems like the circumstances are quite specific, and I don't entirely grasp what you're referring to. So I think it's one of those things that I might need to talk to you directly to better understand, because I don't exactly, like, with those details, like, I don't know what are you forced to decide on, what agency you're talking about. Huh? Yeah, we could talk about it. Let's talk about it offline. That way it'll make more sense because there's a lot of people here. We'll talk about it right after, inshallah. Bidnillahi ta'ala.
Yeah, sister.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask it at some point. I saw it was coming up. And just a general comment, I know there's questions that are at the top. I try to get to the ones that are most relevant first. And if we do have time towards the end, we get to the ones that are a little bit, that are important, but a little off topic. But the sister is asking, she's a revert, and her family supports her a lot throughout Ramadan, and is always there by her side. And now that it's the holidays and it's closer to Christmas, she's wondering how can she reciprocate that, and in a way that is not disrespectful to the deen, and in a way that is halal.
Jazakallah khair for your question. May Allah bless your journey in Islam. I think that, your question actually reminds me of the topic that we're talking about, very profoundly. Because I think one of the those who struggle most with the idea of who to learn their deen from and who to learn from their Islam from are newcomers to the religion. Because when you're a newcomer to Islam, everyone wants to become your teacher. I can't tell you how many times reverts have come to me with trying to figure out whether what their fellow brother or their fellow sister is telling them in the masjid is Islam or culture or something else in between. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless your journey. That's what I could say. And on top of this, like, it hurts me sometimes when I find people very loosely speaking about things that really affect people's lives. Like, there was one story that was shared with me. I always mention this. It's like a very typical thing. Someone becomes Muslim. You find the ignorant Muslims around that person start giving them erroneous advice. Oh, now what's your new Muslim name going to be? Right? Whether a guy or a girl, you go to them, oh, okay, you grew up your whole life as John. And now these new Muslim friends of yours are telling you, oh, we're going to call you Abdul Rahman. Abdul Rahman. And I joked about this in one of the schools I teach about. And, I'm like, I get so bothered by that because I just feel so bad for the parents who raised this person. They might not be Muslim. How must they feel right now after they named their son like 30 years ago, John? Now he's coming to them and telling them, hey, by the way, now I'm Abdul Rahman, right? And I could only think that these people are probably thinking, man, this guy's going to end up on Fox News. Man, he's going to do something. Because they don't understand Islam yet. They're going to get nervous and worried, like, well, what is this religion that's changing everything about my son or my daughter? That's not what Islam's supposed to do. Islam's not supposed to change who you are. And actually, I was, someone shared with me about a sister who became Muslim. Her name was Pam. And she worked at a Muslim institution, and they refused to name her Pam. They said, no, we can't. You need to change your name, right? And you need to accept a Muslim name now. And she changed it. I forgot what they said she changed it to. I think it might have been Zainab or something. And then like years later, she realized that this is not actually a teaching in the religion. So she realized she could go back to being Pam. And she wanted to do that, right? So anyway, but a lot of misinformation. Those brothers, like if you ever see this happening, like when a person becomes Muslim, a brother or sister, and you see a crowd of people around him, like hold him for like a half an hour, you should scold those people. You should shout at them. Tell them, be quiet. Leave the guy alone. Don't start trying to put a kufi on his head and give him a miswak and tell him if you don't stop drinking alcohol and you don't start coming to the masjid every day and if you don't and you can't go to any of your family's gatherings anymore and you need to tell them and you should this person, if he was in an Islamic state, I'm exaggerating now because I'm bothered, this person would be beaten, ta'zir, This person who dares say things that end up affecting this new Muslim's life. Some people, because of what these people do to these new Muslims, they end up making them leave the religion, right? So again, like, who should you learn your deen from? Not those people. Please, anyone who's new to Islam, if anyone does that to you, take it in gracefully and move on. Anyway, calm down a bit. So, getting to your question, should you attend the gatherings? Look, be very mindful of how your Islam is going to influence your family. Make sure that they always see the beautiful side of it, that they see that Islam has made you more connected with them. Look, the Prophet ﷺ was approached by one of the women companions, and her mother was still a polytheist. She came to visit her. So she said, my mother came to me and she wants to see me and she doesn't believe. Should I reach out? Should I accept my mother into my home? And so the Prophet ﷺ told her, yes, of course. Accept your mother into your home. And this is a woman who antagonized the Prophet. She spoke ill of the Prophet, right? So it was during his time. So no, Islam should make me more connected with my family. But meaningful and mindful connection, not at the sacrifice, not at the expense of my principles and my values, right? So I will continue to show my family love until it gets to a point where, okay, no, this is a little bit of too much of a gray. I'm not going to participate in religious prayers. I won't do that. You want to give a gift to make your mother or father feel good? Give a gift anytime. Why not? It's fine. You don't need to do it in a celebratory fashion with Christmas or whatever it is. Christmas is coming up, and they're used to getting a gift from you. Give it a week before. That's fine. They're having a family gathering. Go to the family gathering until you see something that violates your deen, then gracefully withdraw, right? I don't need to argue with my disbelieving mother or father about drinking alcohol. Hey, they're not there yet. I don't need to have arguments with them. Me coming to Islam should not be characterized by debates and arguments and feuds. It shouldn't be that, right? I'm going to go early into the gathering. I'll stay there for the food, and then I'll make it like, I have some engagement, I need to go. I'm going to gracefully withdraw, right? I'm not even going to say why, right? Until they learn to love my Islam. I know people, they came to Islam, and their family started loving Islam because of what it did to their son or daughter. That's a beautiful result. I love that. And one of the brothers, he shared that with me, that before he was Muslim, he was so far and distant, and he wasn't really connected with his family. When he became Muslim, the opposite happened. So they started loving Islam because of what it did, right? So that's what I would say to that type of question, right? Allah Alam.
There was a brother in the back.
Is there any tea or coffee over there? Radwan forgot us today. If there's any, if you could just... Barakallah feekum. You want to repeat it?
Yeah, that was a great question. So the Sheikh earlier had mentioned that as you search for knowledge and you look for knowledge, you'll get what you want. So if you're looking for those clickbaity, quick 15-second clips just to make you feel good, you'll get that. But if you're looking for intellectual or critical thinking or something stimulating, something that'll help you build faith and deen and knowledge, you'll get that. How do we go from that one mentality to the other? How do I go from just looking for those 15-second clips to...
Very good question. So the answer to this question is, I need to understand what is required of me to learn, and then when I understand that, things will fall in place. So motivational talks have their place, but alongside the motivational talks I listen to, there are certain things about Islam that I need to learn. We call them furud a'yan. These are individual obligations that I cannot be ignorant of, right? So when I realize that I need to get a dose of studying the Prophet ﷺ's life, I need to learn about the Prophet. I need to learn a basic level of knowledge in terms of my fiqh. I need to understand what my belief system is all about, right? Those topics will naturally guide you towards things that are more of substance, because now I realize, okay, I can't just stay with the general motivational talks that are, that are not really going in depth and explaining something. I need to actually find something that, it's not just going to give a feel-good effect on my heart. So once I realize the content I need to learn, then inshallah ta'ala, and then besides that, again, there needs to be this human connection. Do-it-yourself methods, right? When it comes to Islamic knowledge, do-it-yourself methods are not very good, right? Why? The person who's self-taught and got their knowledge, the scholars actually warned about taking knowledge from someone who only got it through self-taught methods, right? The person reads a lot, person's smart, does a lot of research and things. That type of person will always come forth with the most bizarre things, right? Sometimes, and then you'll be able to when you get exposed to a lot of things in this regard, you'll be able to, start weighing. There's generally a certain content and approach being disseminated in khutbahs, for example, right? It's more general, more spiritual reminder. If you see someone taking to the minbar to speak about every fiery and controversial issue that creates a buzz, then know that this is something problematic. I need to be very careful from this. All right, what? I don't see anyone else doing this. What is this? I don't hear. So, and that's part of the beauty of having a large body of scholarship. We'll start weighing things, right? If you listen to a diverse set of people, then you're going to start realizing what is closer and more in line with what most scholars are on, and what is sort of the breakaways and the things that are far off and far-fetched. Wallahu alam. But again, focus on the content. What do I need to learn? Then the other things will fall in place. I can't just, because by the way, if my entire connection with Islam is all about motivational talks, then guess what? I will likely fall into calamitous doubts in my deen when I'm tested. Because I don't have anything filling that void inside me. It's just motivational talks that are like a person taking drugs. Right? Making me feel good when I feel down, and that's it. I don't have anything inside. I haven't built any knowledge base or understanding within me. Wallah, that's how I would address that. All right, we could take one last question if there is one. Yeah. Any one last question?
There were plenty, but I do want to ask this one.
Okay.
Since it's kind of relevant, and you can let me know. Someone did ask, what made you want to become a sheikh? A little personal.
What made me want to become a sheikh? I think it's probably my journey with connecting with the Quran. That was my first step towards coming to the masjid scene, right? The Quran. So it's there's actually a podcast that's going to come out soon where I have a detailed conversation with a group of brothers. It's called Muslim Made. There's some brothers, Mustafiz and Zunaid, and and there's another brother, subhanAllah, I can't remember his name now, astaghfirullah. But anyway, so in that I talk a little bit more detail about this. But for me, I was in school at the time September 11 happened. And my circumstances put me in public school, and because of that, it was my, I guess the realities put so much emotional pressure that it made me come closer to the masjid. And when I came closer to the masjid, I got connected with people who were studying the Quran, and then I became very invested in that, and that became ultimately the path that led me. And then I found people who encouraged me from the masjid. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless them and reward them. Shaykh Qatanani and others encouraged me to go learn the deen, and through the connecting with the Quran, it ended up leading me go to study overseas. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to accept, inshallah.
Ameen. Barakallahu feek, Shaykhna.
Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. By the way, there's no Friday forum next week. No Friday forum. We're on pause from Wednesday until the following week, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.